Okay, guys, this is the first time I'm doing this way, so I don't even know if it's going to work or not. I have no idea. But I wanted to, I just read a report from Iron Mountain on the possibility and desirability of peace. And this was published in 1967, and it took 2.5 years to write. It was a group of 15 men that were chosen with high uric acid for whatever that's worth. I have no idea, but the guy that released it, he thought that was weird too. And they were professionals from different fields, academia, science, whatever. And they were also high profile people from different fields. So they were, they were just from different fields. They were on television. People would have known their name. This person released it anonymously because he was disturbed by it. And so I wanted to read it. And since most people don't read, I thought I would pick out the most kind of weird or alarming things in it and read them to you. And I watched Geostorm the same day that I read this, so it was kind of interesting. Maybe you'll find the connection as well. Okay, so with that, I'm going to start on page 5. And it says he, and that means a person, may be less surprised to find that the space program and the controversial anti-missile and fallout shelter programs are understood to have the spending of vast sums of money, not the advancements of science or national defense, as the principal goals, and to learn that military draft policies are only remotely concerned with defense. Wasn't too much I picked out of this document. Most of us, and that includes me, had a record of abnormally high uric acid concentration in the blood. So he just thought that was weird that they'd been chosen, and one of the criteria was that they had a high uric acid concentration in the blood. Don't know what that means. He didn't either. There's that. If I get better at editing, I'll start to edit this stuff out. I'm just don't know how to do it. So please bear with me. One writer on the subject puts it this way: why is war so wonderful? Because it creates artificial demand. The only kind of artificial demand, moreover, that does not raise any political issues. War, and only war, solves the problem of inventory. So I got it. It's a very weird document. First of all, the existence of a society as a political nation requires, as part of its definition, an attitude of relationship toward other nations. The elimination of war implies the inevitable elimination of national sovereignty and the traditional nation state. So you can see where this document is going, right? Allegiance requires a cause. A cause requires an enemy. In each case, the extent and gratuitousness of the slaughter in Hiroshima and Nagasaki were abstracted into political formulae by most Americans once the proposition that the victims are enemies was established. The menace must be believable. It must be of a magnitude consistent with the complexity of the society threatened, and it must appear, at least, to affect the entire society. I wonder what that could be right now. War provides for the periodic necessary readjustment of standards of social behavior, the moral climate, and for the dissipation of general boredom, one of the most consistently undervalued and unrecognized of social phenomena. And I kind of see that with people wearing masks. Like, I don't know if they feel like they're in a movie or if they're going to like doing this for the rest of their lives. But anyway, what has been implied, although not yet expressly put forth, is the development of a long-range sequence of space research projects with largely unattainable goals. Remember, this is the goal. I mean, I just put that in. First, it is unlikely to phase itself out. Regardless of the predictable surprises science has in store for us, the universe is too big. Which go do a Google search on Antarctica coastline. Third, it lends itself extraordinarily well to arbitrary control. A more sophisticated variant is the proposal to establish the unarmed forces of the United States. Experiments have been proposed to test the credibility of an out-of-our-world invasion threat. It is possible that a few of the more difficult-to-explain flying saucer incidents of recent years were, in fact, early experiments of this kind. And I'm going to interject something here. This was written in 1967, so post World War II, in Area 51, what I believe was going on was that the anti-aircraft gravity machines that were being built in Germany, Nazi Germany, were just transferred over to Area 51 and NASA, which means to deceive in Hebrew, by the way. It may be, for instance, that gross pollution of the environment can eventually replace the possibility of mass destruction by nuclear weapons as the principal apparent threat to the survival of the species. Poisoning of the air and of the principal sources of food and water supply is already well advanced, and at first glance would seem promising in this respect. It constitutes a threat that can be dealt with only through social organization and political power. But from present indications, it will be a generation to a generation and a half. So what is that? About 30 years? 20 to 30 years from 1967? 77, 87, 97, 1997. Before environmental pollution, however severe, will be sufficiently menacing on a global scale to offer a possible basis for a solution. Okay. The United Nations Agenda 21 was a meeting at Rio de Janeiro in 1992. So that would have put it right in the middle of this time period. It is true that the rate of pollution could be increased selectively for this purpose. In fact, the mere modifying of existing programs for the deterrence of pollution could speed up the process enough to make the threat credible much sooner. But the pollution problem has been so widely publicized in recent years that it seems highly improbable that a program of deliberate environmental poisoning could be implemented in a politically acceptable manner. Did you just hear that? When I was watching that World Economic Forum Reset video that they just released, I'm looking at it going, did they pollute the earth on purpose so that they could do this? And I'm sorry, but that's what this sounds like to me. However unlikely some of the possible alternate enemies we have mentioned may seem, we must emphasize that one must be found of credible quality and magnitude if a transition to peace is ever to come about without social disintegration. Like now. It is more probable, in our judgment, that such a threat will have to be invented rather than developed from unknown conditions. And everything's invented. During the Vietnam War, the Black Panther Party and the Rainbow Coalition, which actually was a multicultural, it was the American Indian movement and blacks and Asians and whites, whatever, the multicultural movement, and it's been turned into an LGBTQ gay thing, but whatever. But they were organic. The BLM and Antifa are the George Soros, Bill Gates, United Nations, communist, Marxist faction, and that's bad enough. But then you have Trump sending in these troops to solve the problem. BLM is not organic, and I don't know, I didn't know what that meant for a long time. So organic just means, for those of you that don't get it, organic means that I was sitting in my house and I'm like, hey, you know what? We should really have a protest about COVID tyranny. And I call up my friend, or I Facebook my friend, which now that woman just got arrested for doing exactly that on Facebook, got arrested. And we create this, it's from the bottom down. Organic means from the bottom up and not the top down. BLM, Black Lives Matter, which is a racist name. If I went around, and I'm white, obviously, and said, with a sign that said White Lives Matter, what would happen to me? And the thing is, they've complicated this whole matter. I'm getting off topic, but they've complicated this whole matter because it is true. I was told by a member of the Macomb Police Department, sorry, and he's not alive anymore. He died because he got allopathic healthcare and that killed him basically. So anyway, he told me that I wasn't the right race or gender to be targeted, which I was. I did go to jail in 2006. That's another story for another day. Okay. There is no question but that a universal requirement that procreation be limited to the products of artificial insemination. There's no question but that a universal requirement that procreation be limited to the products of artificial insemination would provide a fully adequate substitute control for population levels. Such a reproductive system would, of course, have the added advantage of being susceptible of direct eugenic management. And I think, I don't know where I read or saw, but that you're not supposed to have sex with anyone that doesn't live in your household. So they're starting in this. It is interesting that the groundwork for such a value-free aesthetic is already being laid today in growing experimentation in art without content, perhaps in anticipation of a world without conflict. Oh, how nice. And if you look into art, who's that guy? Andy Warhol, they have ties to the CIA, and it's just garbage art. I can look around and I know what art is, and I know what isn't. Okay, and this is substitutes for the functions of war, models, economic. Their B was a giant open-ended space research program aimed at unreachable targets. So as you can see, NASA is a money laundering agency. It's laundering your money. They've come up with like Mars rovers with that look like overhead projectors on wheels, and they send them to Greenland, take pictures, put a red film over it, and then you can find it on Google Earth. No wonder Trump wants to buy Greenland. Okay, political. A, an omnipresent, virtually omnipotent international police force, and we have that. We have it. It's called the United Nations Police, UNPOL, and I just read a document there where they're holding down, they're not detaining people in host states yet to take them to detention facilities, United Nations detention facilities. They're standing down right now, but rest assured, because of these COVID policies, they won't stand down for much longer, I don't think. And they'll be trading forces. So, since I own a costume shop, the tags inside of the military say NATO on them. That's who's manufacturing these uniforms since the 90s. So from my perspective, it looks like people have been dumbed down. The military and the police do not understand that you cannot suspend. If you're watching, please understand this. Please understand this. You can never suspend the Constitution of the United States. Ever. No, that is not in the Constitution. In fact, in the Declaration of Independence, it says if your government becomes so tyrannical, it is in the Constitution that you have to overthrow it. We are there. We're at that point. B, an established and recognized extraterrestrial menace. This is B on the political. C, massive global environmental pollution. D, fictitious alternate enemies. So these are these models that they want to use. This is 1967. So space aliens, global environmental pollution. What is climate change? The fictitious climate change. Fictitious alternate enemies like Osama bin Laden and ISIS and Al Qaeda and now COVID and whatever. Sociological control function. B, a modern sophisticated form of slavery. So that it would be technological slavery. You can read more about that from Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, who didn't bomb anybody, he claims, and I believe him. Motivational function. A, intensified environmental pollution. B, new religions or other mythologies. Yeah, look at the Video Music Awards. C, or any of these other awards, they're satanic beyond they're satanic rituals. I mean, there's no other way to explain them. C, socially oriented blood games. D, combination forms. Ecological, a comprehensive program of applied eugenics. Cultural, scientific. The secondary requirements of the space research, social welfare, and or eugenic programs. Okay, then we're on to substitutes for the function of the war. Evaluation. Political. Like the inspection scheme surrogates, proposals for plenipotentiary international police are inherently incompatible with the ending of the war system. The unarmed forces variant, amended to include unlimited powers of economic sanction, might conceivably be expanded to constitute a credible external menace. So if you can, report on the news, the weather, they're not necessarily lying, but if you report on the news where there's high temperatures everywhere on the earth, the flat earth that is flat, mind you, and you just report those high temperatures. There are also record low temperatures. There's also, everybody has record high temperatures all the time. Everybody has record low temperatures all the time. So it depends on what you pick and choose to report on, right? And that's a whole nother topic of discussion. But the climate is changing. See these words that they use? The climate is changing. Like, you can't deny the climate changes all the time. But it changes all the time. But we're really entering into an ice age. So that's the truth. They went from global warming to climate change because the climate was changing to be cooler. So, and now it's whatever, ridiculous. Sorry, my dog is barking. The environmental pollution model does not seem sufficiently responsive to immediate social control, except through arbitrary acceleration of current pollution trends. This in turn raises questions of political acceptability. The environmental pollution model does not seem sufficiently responsive to immediate social control except through arbitrary acceleration of current pollution trends. This in turn raises questions of political acceptability. Okay. Sociological, motivational function. Intensified environmental threats may raise ecological dangers. Myth-making dissociated from war may no longer be politically feasible. Purposeful blood games and rituals can far more readily be devised than implemented. Blood games, like gladiator kind of stuff. A nuclear physicist once remarked, in respect to a possible disarmament agreement, if we could change the world into a world in which no weapons could be made, that would be destabilizing. But agreements we can expect with the Soviets would be destabilizing. The qualification and the bias are especially irrelevant. Any condition of genuine total peace, however achieved, would be destabilizing until proved otherwise. The models considered in the preceding chapter, both those that seem promising and those that do not, have one positive feature in common: an inherent flexibility of phasing. I don't know where have we heard that word before. An arbitrary all-or-nothing approach is no more realistic in the development of contingency peace programming than it is anywhere else. This agency will be provided with they're suggesting creating a permanent war peace research agency. This agency will be provided with non-accountable funds sufficient to implement its responsibilities and decisions at its own discretion. So without no oversight, and with an unlimited budget and no oversight, that's what it kind of sounds like to me. And B, will have authority to preempt and utilize without restriction any and all facilities of the executive branch of the government in pursuit of its objectives. So basically with no oversight, I just said that. We'll be able to do whatever the hell it wants with an unlimited budget. And some of the resources from this document were Arthur I. Waskow, Toward the Unarmed Forces of the United States. This is an unabridged edition of the text of a report and proposal prepared for a seminar of strategists and congressmen in 1965. It was later given limited distribution among other persons engaged in related projects. So it was selective to who they gave this to, but by unarmed forces of, I mean, they use these words. They're using quarantine. You know, quarantine means home arrest. Isolation means solitary confinement. Detainment means prison. This is what communists do. You know, war is peace. Whatever. Okay, the obverse of this phenomenon is responsible for the principal combat problem of present-day infantry officers, the unwillingness of otherwise trained troops to fire at an enemy closely enough to be recognizable as an individual rather than simply as a target. And then we have drones. So they, you know, these video games are financed, to me, look like they're mostly financed by the Department of Defense, and they're training people to shoot and kill. And so if they're, you know, I mean, can you not see where they could be given like a virtual, with 5G, they could be given a virtual game and they don't even know that it's real people? I mean, I can kind of see that happening. Very much I can see that happening. Video, the reception of a freedom budget for all Americans, proposed by A. Philip Randolph et al. It is a 10-year plan estimated by its sponsors to cost $185 billion. Freedom budget for all Americans. I think that's been introduced. I was just saw something about that where they want to basically give everybody money for doing nothing. So, total communism. By several current theorists, most extensively and effectively by Robert R. Harris in The Real Enemy, an unpublished doctoral dissertation made available to this study. And that's about what I picked out of that document. So, and the reason why I'm showing you these pictures of the pictures from Geostorm is because, as you can see, you know, people laugh and scoff when you say Hollywood isn't financed by the Department of Defense. Well, NASA, you can see pictures of NASA here, you know, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, which Jack Parsons was an illusionist, and he was hired to make fancy explosions that make it look like there's space shuttles flying off into space. That's all he did. He was an illusionist. He was nothing. And then he went to work for Hollywood. He got in trouble, and then he went to work for Hollywood, and then all of a sudden he had this weird, strange explosion, and he died, and no one knows why. But I watched the Geostorm, so that's why I'm putting up these pictures. The UN. What if I made a movie and I put the UN and NASA and the Democratic National Committee and ISS? I have to get their permission. Like, you have to have they have to back this story. And Geostorm, if you haven't seen it, is basically the Earth has become so polluted that now this rebel guy creates this satellite, and they've got Skynet or whatever they call it in this movie, I forgot, and we're no longer responsible enough to take care of the environment, so it had to be man-made, and it got hacked, and so he had to go up into the satellite and save the day. But you can see the players, the unlimited amount of budget there is into the space program, all the environmental catastrophe, and it was like, wow, should this movie have been called Iron Mountain instead of Geostorm? I don't know. Okay, leave your thoughts. Bye.